Okay, so in this unit, I want to talk about issues of distributive justice. And I thought in this first lecture, I would just say a little bit about what we even mean by this term distributive justice. So there's a few ways of thinking about what questions of distributive justice are getting at, what these debates are about. And one way you might put this is, when we talk about distributive justice, we're trying to answer the question, how should we distribute society's resources? For reasons we will see, some people like Nozick won't like that sort of characterization. A sort of simpler and more neutral way we should put this, we might put this is who should get what? That's the kind of question we are answering. Or what do members of a society owe each other? So, I think a good way to get at this, rather than just talk about these sort of abstract definitions, is to look at some things that are questions of distributive justice. So, one thing that's very much a question of distributive justice, should we care about inequality? You'll hear people like Bernie Sanders saying, well, the 1% or whatever percent have so much of society's resources. People lower down the ladder have very little. They will think that that is some sort of a problem, that some people have too much and some people have too little. Should we care about the fact of inequality? Is there a certain amount that the wealthiest should have and the poorest should have and the middle class and so on? If we should care about inequality, well, how much should we allow? Past what point is inequality a bad thing? Another question, that gets at these issues of distributive justice, which we as a society also fight about, are what should the tax rates be? What percentage should the wealthy pay? What percentage should the middle class pay? We're probably going to think, most people will, that the wealthy should pay a somewhat higher percentage. Well, how much higher should that be? Should it even be higher? Some people will challenge that. Nozick, I think, would very much challenge the idea that the wealthy should pay more. Another question of distributive justice, what role should the government have in making sure people have access to health care, right? Programs like Medicare and Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act, which people call Obamacare, are these things justified? Should we go even further? What role should the government play in making sure that people who otherwise might not be able to have access to health care do have access? Should the government provide pensions to the elderly and disabled? Things like Social Security. If it should provide those sorts of pensions or assistance, how generous should they be, right? One of the things you'll hear about if you follow politics really closely is the so-called consumer price index, which they use to figure how much they're going to pay for Social Security each year, right? You get inflation, how much should you adjust or up the Social Security payments each year to deal with inflation? That is a question of distributive justice. These things get in the weeds pretty quickly. How you figure this index, how you adjust Social Security in light of it. But this is also a question of distributive justice. Well, finally, another one, and this does not exhaust these questions by any means. I'm just trying to give you guys a better sense for what these questions are. But a final one, think about unemployment insurance or unemployment benefits. Should the government play some kind of role in helping people who lose their jobs because of bad luck or a downturn? Should it do something to help them while they find another job, while they're unemployed? And if it should, how generous should the aid it gives be, right? We see this when we think of the coronavirus pandemic, Democrats and Republicans Both agreed that we should have higher unemployment benefits. Well, but they argued about how much, right? That is very much an argument about distributive justice. Okay, so hopefully this gives you guys a feeling for what we're talking about when we talk about distributive justice. I think the easiest way to define this term would just be say, would just be to say it's about who should get what, right? That's not super informative. It's also not controversial, but I hope these examples give you guys some more information, allow you guys to see a bit more what we mean by it.